Ultra Reddit presents. Redditors, what's the worst thing you've eaten out of politeness? Husband's mom made a lemon pie, but it was a special recipe she learned from her friend where there was no sugar and the crust was made of saltine crackers. Don't even have words for how sour and salty it was, but you best believe I ate it as it was delicious. I am actually the one who made the horrible meal. When I was around 8, I decided I wanted my mom to relax while I cooked her dinner and did the dishes. I made way overcooked spaghetti with a plain can of diced tomatoes that I added water to because I thought that is how sauce worked. Finished it off with every seasoning herb we own plus some ketchup because the sauce looked a little too much like water, and oh, heck, some mustard, mayo and any sauce I saw in the fridge because she liked all those things. My mom took her first bite, smiled through it, told me how much she enjoyed not having to cook, then ate every freaking bite on her plate. She told me much later on that she ate the dinner I made her because she didn't want to discourage me from taking initiative and trying new things. She also later told me it was the most god-awful thing she had ever eaten in her life. Am I the asshole? If I called CPS on a girl my roommate had over last night? I got home yesterday at around 6:30 p.m. and my roommate, who is a very good friend, had invited over, but there's more. She had brought her 2 to 3-year-old boy who is adorable. Now keep in mind that I am a parent myself of a 3-year-old boy and a 5-year-old boy, so I'm very protective of kids, so I'm overthinking things, but I don't am. When I got there they had the kids sitting in the room watching children's show, but the TV was muted and she had her music blasting really loud instead. Now this music was, in my opinion, music a 2 to 3-year-old boy shouldn't be listening to for at least 10 to 13 more years. As an example, when Cons Y'all Want a Single came on, she goes guy love this one and turns it up even louder, to the point where we can barely hear each other talk. Now I wanted to point out that my friend was drunk at this point, so I don't think he even realized anything was going on with the child because I know he wouldn't have been okay with it either, having a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old himself. Around 8 p.m. I went and hid in my room cause she annoyed me, and for the next hours I would say about 90% of the time this little boy was crying, and she either ignored it or would scream at him to shut up. He then went quiet, and about half an hour later I heard them go up to his room. I went out to see what happened to the boy and I saw him curled up in a little on the floor next to the couch in just a diaper. The ceiling of him was on and he was freezing touch, so I put a blanket over him but otherwise didn't want to move him. Back in the late 1970s, I was sent from California to a rural Maryland town for a 6-month job assignment. I was used to the wide variety of very fresh vegetables grown within a couple of hours of my city. In that rural Maryland town, I rarely saw what I would consider good fresh vegetables, except for a very short season when farmers markets had local produce. I really missed my good veggies. I rented part of a house that had been converted to apartments. The nice elderly couple next door had a huge vegetable garden, consisting primarily of green beans. I used to lust after those beans. One day, Mrs. Neighbor saw me outside and invited me to join them later in the day for a barbecue. We are going to have the first of our own green beans. I could hardly wait. I was so looking forward to those beans. Mr. Neighbor barbecued and Mrs. Neighbor plated the food in the kitchen. With great pride, she handed me a plate containing an incinerated steak and a bunch of gray tubes. We like our green beans best after they have been canned. Yep. She had home canned the green beans, then cooked them, Southern style, for an hour or so with a chunk of ham. I looked at my plate. I looked over at all those crisp, vibrant beans still on the plants. I looked back at my plate. I never knew I possessed such good acting ability. Was visiting Guatemala, and this old lady invited us to dinner. In this country, it's extremely rude to not eat what was placed before you. Unfortunately, this lady served us a vegetable soup with some meat in it that tasted like chicken broth from hell. She didn't eat with us, as she was being polite or something. She didn't even talk to us during the dinner. We took a taste, and nearly wanted to puke. However, due to the country customs, we decided to eat it. We barely could get through it. We ate about 3/4 of it and then mentioned we were just full. We both retched later on that night. It was so nasty. Ran into the lady later in the week walking down the street, and she apologized to us. Apparently the chicken was rotten and she only took 1 bite. She then chastised us for not telling her. Sometimes it's frustrating not knowing all the ins and outs of different customs. I went to Kenya on a college trip. For the first week we were there we built a kitchen into a school. Every day my buddy and I would joke about this goat at the school and his biggest nuts were. Well, fast forward and the last day we were there the school put on a feast, eating corn, beans and kale, grown at the school, with goat meat. The local elders came by at the end to show their appreciation. My teacher, who was from Kenya, got up and said the elders have prepared a delicacy. It is somewhat of an insult to not eat what they present you. Bam, here came the karma bus. Now I enjoy fried Rocky Mountain oysters. However, what they served was a barely boiled got ball. I tore off a sizable chunk like a champ. I will never forget the rubbery texture, or the ultra gummy taste, but I ate it like I was honored for even being offered. This one's actually kinda funny. My grandma died right before Christmas. We all got together for the holiday and my aunt was understandably still taking it really hard. She'd made something she called vanilla angel food pudding cake. It was in a shallow casserole dish. Top layer was whipped cream and cookie crumble. Middle layer was vanilla pudding. Bottom layer was crumbled angel food cake, soaked to the top in a massive pool of bourbon. The cake was floating in the bourbon. We'd later found out she'd mixed even more bourbon into the pudding layer. She didn't tell anyone it was alcoholic, so we all got scoops assuming it was a syrup or something. My cousin was the first to bite into it and had to run to the trash can to vomit as soon as it got in her mouth. Another person got a forkful near their nose and freaked out and yelled in shock. Cue my aunt beginning to completely melt down about how she's trying so hard and she got the recipe from a friend and it's not that much alcohol and grandma was such a good cook she would have helped her etc, like full blown about to lose it. The cousin that vomited tried to claim it was something else while the yeller tried to play off that they saw a bug across the room. Everyone else was sufficiently guilted into eating at least some of what they'd scooped onto their plates. That shit was physically painful to eat. Everything burned. Looking around the table you would have thought we were all downing spoonfuls of wasabi. I was 19 but I guess my parents were more worried about my aunt than me getting underage sloshed on pudding, but about halfway through my portion they found a discreet way to dump my plate. The whole place reeked a couple minutes after we dug into the pudding too, so it was this awful inescapable sensory overload of bourbon. The most fucked up dinner I have ever seen. 2 years ago I was invited by my best friend and her family to spend Christmas with them. Her grandparents were the sweetest old people you could think of, so I was exited, even though I normally hate Christmas. The only problem was my best friend's father. He was an old, alcoholic asshole, who was mostly separated of the rest of the family and luckily ignored me most of the time, but his white trash girlfriend, best friend's mother died, thought it would be a delight to invite me and BF to a Christmas dinner. God, it was a shit show start to finish. I have a very strong stomach, but after that I got nauseous. A goose that was dry, with congealed fat throughout, red cabbage made with fucking mulled wine spice, and the worst lasagna I have ever seen. The only good thing was that the dinner happened at trash girlfriend's home, so we could get away after that and get drunk afterwards. God, it was so disgusting it still upsets me thinking about it. Not so bad as some of the others, but I once was visiting family in Scotland with my grandparents. At the time, age 12 or so, I was a fairly picky eater, so when we went over for dinner, they had lamb for everyone else and peanut butter sandwiches for me. Not wanting to appear rude, and wanting to seem adventurous, I decided to go for the lamb. Unfortunately, the first few bites made it clear to me that lamb was not a good fit for my tastes. Nevertheless, I followed the classic mantra of improvise, adapt, overcome. Looking around the table, I spotted a convenient pitcher of water and hatched a plan. I cut off a suitably small bit of lamb and placed it in my mouth. I would then thoughtfully pretend to chew and swallow, then casually grab a sip of water. In reality, I was gumming the lamb, then swallowing it whole. Of course, by the end of the meal, I'd gone through 3 cups of water, nearly half the pitcher. Nevertheless, my ruse apparently worked because when I revealed my scheme several days later, my grandparents seemed suitably surprised. I play Call of Duty competitively, for fun. I'm not a professional, and Search and Destroy has genuinely done wonders for my ability to outlast in tough situations. Scores are tied, last round. Next to your teammate. Teammate pushes, he calls out an enemy, the enemy plants the bomb, the time is at 30 seconds, 25s, 20 seconds, you find a kill to make it 2v1, 15 seconds, your teammate dies, the defuse time 0.5 seconds, so I'm calculating whether I have time to push the enemy and make it back to defuse or if the enemy doesn't have enough time to begin defusing immediately. Tick, tock, tick, tock. You don't have time for oh shit. Nobody has time to talk about something crazy that just them. You are being given split-second time periods, take in what you see, and make a move based on it. During sudden, unexpected moments of stress in my life, it is good nature for me to instantly start thinking about a solution, put the pieces together in my head as best I react appropriately. A few Christmas ago my bro-in-law was in charge of the turkey. He carved and brought out a plate and left the carcass on the cutting board on the counter. I got up mid-meal to get more alcohol and the carcass was just dripping with blood and still covered in raw meat. I guess he had picked out the best pieces and put them on the plate. That bird needed another 2 hours for sure. People ended up leaving early feeling ill. Fast forward to 2 a.m. and my husband has decided to puke, naked, in our only bathroom. This is when I realized why people tell you to sit and puke in a garbage can when you have food poisoning or the flu. I never did get all the shit off that wall. But considering that apartment had the worst landlord ever, I didn't feel too bad. We moved a week later anyhow.
Thank you for watching this fantastic story. Please tap one of the 4 videos on the screen for another amazing top Reddit stories.